Okay, so let's look at Unit 1, which is a revisit to some of the key concepts covered in ITIL 4 Foundation. So what do we hope to achieve in this particular unit? So we need to understand the key concepts of service management. In particular, how the ITIL guiding principles can help an organisation adopt and adapt an approach to service management. We're going to look at the 4 dimensions of service management to give us that holistic big picture view of work we're undertaking. And then we need to understand the sort of purpose and key components of the service value system, or the SVS. And finally, we look at the activities within the service value chain, how they interconnect. You'll recall the service value chain is part of that service value system, but the service value chain is where all the activities take place. So we need to revisit these, refresh our understanding before we move on to the CDS course proper. Okay, let's first look at this area called service relationships. Okay, and we're going to look initially at this thing called a service offering. So we've talked a lot in ITIL 4 about our products and services, how they should create value for our consumers, how they should facilitate outcomes that are important to their success without the associated costs and risks of provision. But we introduced this term called a service offering. So a service offering is in essence where we actually recognise there may be some different consumer groups that may benefit from a more sort of tailored service. So we're still basing it in essence on the core products and services for that service, but we recognise maybe different consumer groups that we may be able to actually target with a more tailored solution. So we can see there in the definition of a service offering a description of one or more services designed to address the needs of a target consumer group. A service offering may include goods, access to resources and service actions. So to bring that alive, if we think perhaps in terms of the corporate organisation and the sort of corporate sort of desktop products and services that are in place to support that, there may well be, a number of different consumer groups, who may require a slightly different service. So we might have office-based workers, who work at a fixed location. They have a standard desktop and, a level of support appropriate for their needs. But we may also have a part of the workforce that might be mobile or remote. This could be people on the road, there may be people involved in sales, or indeed, of course, for IT organisations. A lot of the time, our IT sort of practitioners may be on call providing support out of hours. So they may have a different requirement, which might be a laptop, it might be a mobile phone, it might be a laptop bag. And then we might have in the organisation certain roles where we actually wish to provide maybe a higher level of maybe support. Typically this might be senior executives, maybe in universities, it could be professors, maybe in hospitals, it could be consultants, where IT issues affecting their ability to do work day to day may warrant a higher level of support. Quite often this is referred to as a VIP service. So that service offering, when we've talked about the desktop service, all the products and all the different technologies involved in delivering a desktop service, we've actually identified that we might have 3 target consumer groups where we can provide a slightly more tailored solution based on their needs. Okay, so that's a service offering. So what are the components of a service offering? Okay, so we've got this concept of goods, access to resources and service actions. So in some cases we may need to provide goods. If you think of that desktop service, the different desktop service offerings, we're going to have to provide goods. Certainly for the mobile remote service offering, we're going to have to provide a laptop and a mobile phone. For the VIP and for the sort of normal desktop user, they're going to need at least a standard desktop. So there will be goods provided. Again, if you think of this in your own sort of personal life, you know, if you subscribe to a telecommunications company for a mobile phone service, then one of the things they're going to do for you is to provide you with a mobile phone. So this concept of goods, okay? The key thing is once these have been actually transferred to you, yeah, as the consumer, you take responsibility for those goods and its future use. So if you lose them, if they get damaged, if they get stolen, then I'm sure, yes, they can be replaced, but you'll probably need to provide a credit card number or a cost centre number to get a replacement. So this concept of once the goods are transferred to the consumer, at that point they have to take responsibility for its future use. Of course, being provided with goods which enable you to access services is obviously key. Then of course the actual provision of access to the resources you need and to have the appropriate sort of licenses in place for the services and technologies you're going to use is also going to be important. So of course you then need to be given that access. So the service provider grants access, okay? Grants access, make sure everything is licensed correctly. And unlike goods, the service provider retains that responsibility throughout, okay? So the service provider can give and the service provider can take away. So as people leave organisations, access is removed. As people may change roles, then access may be changed. Okay, and in the same way, using our mobile phone example, if you don't pay your monthly bill, maybe after 3 months the service provider will take away all access to your mobile phone. Okay, so access to resources. The final component of a service offering is this thing we call service actions. Okay, so these are the things that we will pre-agree that we are going to do for you. Some of these things you do not need to worry about. Okay, so in terms of, say, the desktop service offerings, you don't need to worry about data being backed up. We're going to do that for you. You don't need to worry about your antivirus software being maintained and kept up to date. We will do that for you. But equally, there may be things you need to ask of us, the service provider. So we will agree what they are in advance. You know, this pre-agreed, predefined, the things that you can request as part of normal service delivery. Okay, those will be our service actions. Typically, we would probably cover these under request fulfillment as the sort of things you can request of us. Okay, and the important thing is pre-agreed, predefined. Yeah, these are things you can legitimately ask for us and we will provide them. Service relationships themselves. So ITIL 4 changed really the perspective of how services are delivered from a service provider perspective. The arm's length approach, where we define a service based on your requirements and we put in place a service level agreement and we sort of review sort of service on a regular basis, changes a little bit with ITIL 4, where actually we recognise the importance of the relationship between the provider and the consumer. Okay, this concept of creating value, yeah, from the services we provide, supporting those outcomes that are important for a consumer to achieve. Well, it's important to understand that actually to achieve the best possible value, both parties need to actually understand each other in a particularly good way, and also that both parties actively work together where there are mutually beneficial areas for service improvement. Okay, so this concept of a service relationship, a cooperation between a service provider and service consumer. Yeah, service relationships include provision of the service, the consumption of the service, and the ongoing management of the relationship between the consumer organisation and the provider organisation. So the service relationship management piece, the key words there are joint activities. Okay, so you're not going to have a service relationship unless both the provider and the consumer are both working together, focused on where can we continue to create this additional value from the services we provide and through the service offerings that we provide. A couple of things about service provision and service consumption. Okay, so service provision, yeah, activities performed by an organisation to provide services. No real surprises there, yeah. So we need to manage the provider's resources. We need to ensure they're configured to deliver the services required. We've already talked about making sure that their access has been put in place for users to actually use those services. And we've also talked about service actions, those things that we will do for you that you don't need to worry about, and those things you can request from us as part of normal service delivery. And of course, in making sure that services continue to deliver and meet expectations, and of course those services need to be managed through our service level management activities, and of course where we may see opportunities to improve through continual improvement. And it just makes the point there, service provision may also include supplying of goods. Service consumption activities, management of the consumer's resources needed to use the service. So this is quite an important point. In terms of that, how do we get best possible value? Then of course there is a requirement on the consumer to also understand what do they need to do to also ensure they get the best possible value from the services being provided. A good example for this could be if you think of a contact centre. Yeah, if you think of all the sort of data and telephony services provided to support a large contact centre, well, if the contact centre doesn't have enough resources, it doesn't have enough agents actually to take calls, and it gets a high number of abandoned calls, and it may get poor customer satisfaction as a result, then actually that's not the responsibility of the service provider. Yeah, the services are being delivered, yeah, they're available, they're reliable. Yeah, but if you don't have enough people to take calls at your peak periods of time, then the contact centre will have high abandonment rates for its calls and maybe get poor customer satisfaction. So that's that point there about the service consumer needs to ensure it also manages its resources needed to use the service. And of course, for the services we provide, those service offerings, make sure that they use, for example, the service actions and the things that we've agreed to provide for them, that those can be requested and used to fulfil any actions required by the consumer organisation. And again, it makes the point, service consumption may also include the receiving or requiring of goods. And continuing this sort of service relationship theme, this service relationship model, quite a nice sort of easy on the eye slide. You don't need to inspect it too much. It's making quite a key point, which is that every provider is also a consumer. If you think of your IT organisation, if you think of the IT services you provide, you will have a dependency, I would imagine, on some services that you're taking from the marketplace or from third-party suppliers, okay? And so this concept of the service relationship, which we've talked about really as a provider with its consumer, then actually as a recipient of services from our suppliers, then of course we need to ensure that that service relationship is also in place between ourselves. Yeah, in this case, we are a consumer of services with our provider of those third-party services. So that service relationship, we also need to apply to ourselves as a consumer of the services we take, which we build upon and deliver our services.